The lion was already in the air when the morning light finally touched the cliffs of Makari Basin. Rex's body, 600 pounds of muscle, scars, and will, hung suspended for an impossible heartbeat, as if nature itself inhaled and forgot to exhale. Above him, wings slapped violently against the wind. The martial eagle, Sky, strained upward with Milo clutched in her talons, the tiny cub twisting in panic. Below Rex yawned a vertical drop so deep the rising mist swallowed the bottom. The world should have ended there. Gravity should have claimed him. But at that moment, he wasn't a lion obeying the laws of instinct. He was simply a father who refused to lose his child. The wind hit him first, a cold, slicing rush that flattened his mane and burned his eyes. Milo's cry carried faintly through the whirling air, a sound too small for a sky so big, and Rex reached just a few inches farther, as if sheer longing could close the impossible distance. For a second, the sun flashed across Milo's golden fur, and Rex saw his own reflection in the cub's wide, terrified eyes. Then the eagle banked hard, pulling Milo upward, and the cub vanished into the blinding morning glare. Far below, flamingos scattered from the lake's surface as Rex's shadow swept across them, stretching long and thin over the trembling water. Ethan, a wildlife filmmaker who had tracked lions for years, froze with his camera halfway to his eye. He had witnessed hunts, battles, births, and the quiet dignity of old age, but never a scene like this. "Lions don't jump off cliffs," he whispered, not sure if he was saying it to himself or to the sky. But this lion did. In that suspended moment, when Rex's paws cut through empty air, the world seemed to narrow into a single fragile truth. Love breaks rules, even ancient ones, even the ones written in bone and blood. And if you're someone who believes stories like this matter, stories about love, sacrifice, the unexpected heroes hidden in the wild, take a moment to follow Whispering Hearts. It helps us keep bringing these true, impossible moments to life for you. The wind swallowed Rex again. His chest tightened as gravity surged upward, dragging him down the cliff face. A column of warm air rushed past, carrying the scent of the lake, wet stone, and something metallic. Fear, perhaps, or fate. Somewhere inside him, instinct howled that this was madness. Lions belonged on the ground. They fought on earth, lived in grass, died in dust. They did not leap into the sky like birds or trust thin air to make room for them. But Rex wasn't thinking about instinct. He wasn't thinking about danger or survival or even the razor-sharp reality of the rocks waiting below. He wasn't thinking about the cost. He was thinking about Milo, his son, and the world tightened into one desperate question. How far will a father go when everything he loves is carried away from him? The answer soared with him through the morning air, defying reason, gravity, and nature's cold arithmetic. Rex fell, but his heart climbed, faster, higher, and fiercer than any creature meant for the ground. And this is where the story truly begins. 6 months earlier, Makari Basin looked nothing like the place where Rex would one day leap into the sky. Back then, the land was quiet, too quiet for a king who had lost everything. Rex moved with a slow, uneven stride, still carrying the wounds from the night 2 younger males drove him out of the territory he once ruled. The scars were not just on his body, they lived in the heavy way he breathed, in the dull glaze of his amber eyes, and in the silence that followed him like a shadow. A dethroned lion has no throne, no pride, no purpose. He survives because instinct demands it, not because hope remains. He walked along the dry edge of the basin, ribs faintly visible beneath his coat. Every step stirred up dust that clung to him like the last remnants of his old life. He should have been surrounded by his lionesses, by cubs tumbling through his paws, Instead, he was alone, stripped of his crown and reduced to a wanderer who slept lightly and woke often. Even the wind seemed to pity him, brushing against his mane with a gentle, almost apologetic touch. The sun dipped low, warming the rocks with a fading gold when Rex first saw her. Luna. She lay curled near a patch of thorn shrubs, breathing hard, her flanks rising and falling in uneven waves. Her golden coat, normally a soft reflection of evening light, was marked with dust and fear. She smelled of exhaustion, of hunger, and of pregnancy, a scent that should have drawn danger, not protection. Rex hesitated. This wasn't his pride. This wasn't his responsibility. A male lion living alone has no reason to approach a vulnerable lioness, especially one carrying cubs he didn't father. Yet something in her shallow breathing tugged at him, a faint reminder of what he lost when he was exiled. Maybe it was the quiet way she lifted her head, meeting his gaze without challenge. Maybe it was the tremor in her legs as she tried to rise, refusing to show fear even when she could barely stand. Behind her, the bushes rustled, a soft, calculated sound. Rex didn't need to see the yellow eyes glinting from the shadows to know what it was. Scarjaw's clan had followed her scent. Hyenas always waited for the weak to fall. Luna wasn't just weak, she was alone, and the night was closing in. Rex stepped forward, placing his body between her and the rustling thorns. He didn't roar, he didn't bare his teeth. He simply stood, a silent wall of strength that said, "You'll go through me first." For the first time since losing his kingdom, Rex wasn't just surviving, he was choosing to protect something again. And without knowing it, he had taken the very first step toward becoming the kind of father who would one day break nature's oldest laws. The first night Rex stayed near Luna, he didn't sleep. He kept his head raised, ears tuned to every shift of the wind, every scrape of thorn, every distant cackle that drifted from Scarjaw's clan. Luna lay only a few feet away, her breathing shallow but steady, her belly rising with the slow weight of unborn life. The moon cast a pale sheen across her coat, softening the harsh exhaustion etched into her frame. She looked fragile, too fragile for the wild. Yet there was something quietly fierce in the way she held herself, even while wounded. By dawn, Luna tried to stand again. Her legs trembled beneath her, and her breath hitched as the ground wavered. Rex watched her struggle, and for a moment he considered turning away. This wasn't his fight. He had lost his pride. He owed nothing to this lone lioness. But when Luna's knees buckled and she sank back to the earth, Rex stepped forward without thinking, nudging her shoulder gently with his muzzle. She didn't flinch. If anything, she leaned into him for the briefest second, a silent acceptance of help. The morning sun warmed the basin, burning off the chill night air. Luna managed to walk a few steps beside Rex, though each movement looked as though it cost her more strength than she possessed. Together they moved toward a patch of taller grass near a dry riverbed, a place where the earth held the memory of water and offered shade from the glare. Luna settled there, lowering herself carefully to avoid pressing too much weight on her swollen belly. Rex circled once around her, scanning the area. Scarjaw's scent lingered faintly, but didn't approach. Not yet. The hyena leader was patient, calculating, traits far more dangerous than reckless hunger. For now, Luna was safe, and Rex's presence made the difference. The realization echoed inside him, unsettling yet familiar. It had been months since anyone relied on him for protection. Luna lifted her head, meeting his gaze again. Her eyes weren't pleading, they weren't fearful either. They held a quiet acknowledgement, as if she recognized the broken king standing before her and understood more than she could say. She let out a small, raspy breath, a sound that wasn't quite a greeting, but wasn't a dismissal either. As the afternoon warmed, the tension eased. Luna dozed lightly, her tail flicking at flies. Rex rested nearby, but his mind didn't wander far. He watched her breathing, the gentle rise and fall of life growing inside her. He watched the curve of her ribs and the faint tremor in her flanks. This lioness had survived storms, hunger, and a chase from Scarjaw's pack, and still she endured. A soft rustle stirred the tall grass behind them. Rex rose instantly, muscles tightening. But instead of hyenas, a small herd of impala passed by, unaware of the unlikely pair resting beside the riverbed. Luna flicked her ears toward the sound, and something like amusement glimmered faintly in her tired eyes. Even here, even now, she still noticed life moving around her. For the first time since his exile, Rex felt something crack open inside him. Not joy, not hope, but a stirring of purpose he thought had died when his old pride was taken. Luna wasn't his mate, wasn't his responsibility, yet he couldn't bring himself to leave her. Not while danger prowled so close, not while she carried the fragile promise of new life. As twilight settled over the basin, Rex lay beside her, close enough to feel the warmth of her breath. He didn't understand why he stayed. He only knew one thing with quiet certainty. A lion who has nothing left can still choose to stand guard over someone who has even less. And in that simple choice, something in Rex's life, something long dormant, began to shift. The heat broke shortly before dusk, replaced by a strange stillness that made the Makari Basin feel hollow, as if the land itself were holding its breath. Rex sensed the shift before the first gust of wind scraped across the dry earth. Luna lifted her head too, ears twitching toward the dark line growing on the horizon. Storms here came fast, violent, unpredictable, and tonight the sky looked ready to tear itself open. Rex stood and scanned the basin. The wind thickened with dust, swirling in restless circles. Herds began to move uneasily. Wildebeest trotted toward higher ground, impala clustered tightly, and a restless tremor ran through a nearby line of Cape buffalo. Lightning flashed far off, illuminating the jagged rim of Makari Basin. Luna struggled to rise, bracing herself against the wind. Her belly hung heavier than the day before, and the strain showed in every breath she drew. She needed shelter, food, anything to steady her for the long night ahead. Rex knew what hunger did to the unborn, and he also knew the storm would scatter prey animals, creating a rare window to hunt the weaker ones. He glanced at Luna. Her ribs quivered beneath her skin. She wouldn't last many more nights without a decent meal. So he made a decision born not from instinct, but from the quiet obligation that had rooted itself in him since the night he found her. As the clouds churned overhead, Rex nudged Luna forward, guiding her toward a shallow wash under a crooked acacia, one of the few places that wouldn't flood quickly. She settled there, though her breathing quickened, fear mixed with exhaustion. The scent of rain thickened. Thunder rolled across the basin, deep enough to rattle the ground. Rex stepped away, signaling he would return. Luna didn't protest. She only watched him, trusting him with a look so soft that it unsettled him more than any storm. The first rainfall struck like thrown pebbles, cold and sharp. Rex moved into the darkening plain, muscles slicked with dust and gathering water. The herds were already panicking, hooves slamming into the ground as they bolted in confused waves. He spotted a young buffalo stumbling near a muddy ridge, struggling to keep pace with the herd. Under normal skies, this hunt would have required Luna's help, but tonight, he hunted alone. Lightning flashed closer now. The herd surged, pushed by thunder and fear. Rex circled quickly through the chaos, but the storm distorted everything: light, sound, scent. What should have been a calculated approach turned into a desperate one. The buffalo lunged in unpredictable directions, each clap of thunder spurring new panic.
The wind carried Luna's scent faintly to Rex, reminding him why he risked the storm at all. He lunged just as the sky ripped open. A white crack of lightning slammed into the plain nearby, sending soil bursting upward. The explosion of sound detonated through the herd. Animals stampeded in every direction at once, their terror amplified to a blind frenzy. Rex lost his footing in the mud, regained it, then sprinted after his target, the young buffalo now slipping near the swollen riverbed. Another thunderclap struck like a hammer, and the herd shifted as one, sweeping across the riverbed in a solid wall of muscle and pounding hooves. Rex tried to break through the chaos, but the stampede had its own brutal momentum. He saw Luna in his mind, hungry, tired, carrying life she could barely protect. He roared, but the storm swallowed the sound. Luna tried to turn, but mud slicked under her paws. The first buffalo slammed beside her, knocking her sideways. Another wave followed. The stampede swallowed her whole. Rex ran harder than he ever had in his life, but the storm didn't care about kings or exiles, and nature tonight had already made its choice.
The storm eased only slightly by the time Rex reached the riverbed, but the damage was already done. The earth was torn into deep grooves, the mud churned into a dark, trembling soup. Buffalo tracks overlapped in chaotic patterns, a map of panic etched into the ground. And at the center of it, half buried in wet soil, lay Luna. Rex slowed, breath ragged, heart thundering louder than the retreating hooves. Luna's body rose and fell in shallow, uneven motions. Her sides trembled with each desperate gasp. Mud streaked her golden coat, and her eyes, once steady, once bright, were dulling beneath the gathering rain. Yet she was alive. Barely. Rex crouched beside her, brushing his muzzle gently along her cheek. The touch drew a faint sound from her throat, a soft rasp that could have been a greeting or a farewell. Her paws twitched weakly. She tried to lift her head, but her strength had already slipped beyond reach. The storm had taken too much. Then her body tightened beneath Rex's touch. A sudden contraction rippled through her belly. Rex froze. Another wave followed, stronger, sharper, forcing Luna's exhausted frame into a painful arch. She let out a strained cry, one filled with suffering and instinct all tangled together. Luna was giving birth. The storm rumbled overhead as if the sky itself bore witness. Luna strained again, pushing against pain that would have toppled a stronger lioness. Rex stood helpless, heart pounding in a rhythm that matched the thunder. He had never seen a birth, not this close, not like this. With a final shudder, her body released. A small, trembling shape slipped onto the mud between them. A cub. Its tiny chest fluttered. Its fur, still damp from the warmth of the womb, clung to its fragile frame. It let out a thin, wavering cry that barely rose above the hiss of rain. Life, soft and new, had arrived in the middle of chaos. Seconds later, another shape followed, but this one never moved. A second cub, still and silent, its small body already cooling in the storm. Rex leaned toward it, nudging it gently, but there was no spark inside, no breath, no fight. Luna's final contraction faded, her breathing slowed. Rex pressed his forehead to hers, feeling her warmth diminish under his touch. Her eyes fluttered open one last time, landing on the living cub at Rex's paws. A look passed between them, not of fear, not even of pain, but of acceptance. And then her gaze unfocused, her body softened, and her breath slipped quietly into silence. The storm did not pause to honor her passing. Rain continued to fall in steady needles, washing mud over her still frame. Yet Rex remained beside her, unwilling to move, unwilling to accept the cruel exchange nature had demanded, one life for another. The newborn cub squirmed weakly, searching blindly for warmth that no longer existed. It let out another faint mewl, this one sharper, more desperate. It cut through the dying storm like a plea. Rex lifted his head. This tiny creature, this scrap of life, hardly larger than Rex's paw, was now alone, just as he had once been, just as Luna had been. The cub nudged blindly against Rex's leg, its small body trembling in the cold. A part of Rex recoiled. Nature's laws whispered their familiar command, "Leave him. Walk away before your heart weakens. A lone male has no place raising a newborn." The cub would not survive. Rex would not survive. He took one step back. The cub cried, high, thin, piercing through the rain. Rex stopped. The wind shifted, carrying Luna's fading scent past him. Dust, warmth, and something like hope. The cub pushed its nose into Rex's fur, seeking comfort where it shouldn't exist. Slowly, Rex lowered his massive head and lifted the tiny lion in his jaws, cradling it with a tenderness no instinct had ever taught him. The cub's cries softened. Life had been born from death. And Rex, without understanding why, had chosen to carry that life into the storm. Rex carried the newborn cub through the fading rain, each step sinking softly into the soaked earth. The storm had weakened, but the air still trembled with its leftover growls. Behind him, Luna's body lay motionless beside the riverbed, already beginning to blend into the mud and shadows. Rex did not look back. He didn't have to. Her scent, warm, familiar, now fading, clung to the cub's damp fur. It would linger for hours, maybe a day, before disappearing forever. The cub whimpered in Rex's jaws, legs dangling, tiny ribs fluttering with shallow breaths. The sound was small, but relentless, a thin needle stitching itself into the rawest parts of Rex's spirit. He stopped beneath a crooked acacia, lowering the cub onto a patch of grass that hadn't yet turned to mud. The little lion pressed its nose against Rex's leg, blindly searching for warmth, milk, anything that meant safety. Rex stepped back. His muscles tensed. In every corner of his mind, every whisper of instinct passed down through generations, the same message repeated with cold certainty. This is not your place. Male lions do not raise newborns. Walk away. And Rex tried. He took one step into the tall grass. The cub cried. He took another step, slower this time. The cub's cry sharpened, rising into the air like a plea that carried Luna's voice inside it. Rex stopped. The wind shifted, carrying Luna's fading scent past him. Dust, warmth, and something like hope. The cub pushed its nose into Rex's fur, seeking comfort where it shouldn't exist. Slowly, Rex lowered his massive head and lifted the tiny lion in his jaws, carrying it with a tenderness no instinct had ever taught him. The cub's cries softened. Life had been born from death, and Rex, without understanding why, had chosen to carry that life into the storm. Night settled over the Makari Basin, bringing colder air and the distant laughter of hyenas. Rex moved toward the high grass, where the wind could mask their scent. He found a small hollow beside a cluster of rocks and lay down, curling his massive frame around the newborn. The cub pressed itself against his chest, trembling until it finally grew still, warmed by the steady rhythm of Rex's breathing. For the first time since his exile, Rex felt something other than emptiness pressing against his ribs. It wasn't joy, it wasn't hope. It was responsibility, unexpected, heavy, and strangely grounding. Above them, the storm clouds drifted apart,
revealing a thin sliver of moonlight. In the dim glow, the cub's face softened, its eyes still tightly shut, unaware that its life had hung on a single choice made by a lion who should have walked away. But Rex hadn't. And with that quiet decision, a decision made in mud and rain and grief, his life and the cub's had begun to change in ways the wild was not prepared for. When morning came, the world would learn what happens when a lion chooses love over instinct.
The first night with the cub, whom Rex still thought of only as the little one, was colder than any he remembered. The storm clouds had drifted east, leaving behind a sharp, biting chill that crept through the grass. Rex curled as tightly as he could around the newborn, pressing the small body into the warmth of his chest. The cub's breaths came in quick, weak flutters, far too fragile for a world built on strength. Every few moments it let out a thin cry, the kind that pierced the silence like a needle. Rex lowered his head each time, brushing it gently with his muzzle, but nothing eased the cub's hunger. He knew the sound. It wasn't fear this time. It was milk, the one thing he couldn't give. The night deepened. Stars flickered weakly through breaks in the drifting clouds. Rex kept his eyes half open, guarding the little one as the wind shifted. He caught it immediately. The musky, sour scent of hyenas. Scarjaw's clan, the same scent that had followed Luna before the storm. They were close, too close, and moving with purpose. Rex rose silently, muscles coiled. The cub mewled at the sudden loss of warmth, but Rex nudged it back beneath the shelter of the rocks. The hollow wasn't much, but it was enough to hide scent and shadow for a few minutes, maybe just enough time to drive the hyenas off. His mane bristled as he stepped into the open grass, scanning the darkness. A low cackle answered him, then another. Yellow eyes glowed in the half-light. Scarjaw himself limped forward, his twisted jaw giving him the snarl that had earned his name. Behind him moved two younger hyenas, lean, restless, and hungry. They didn't charge. They simply circled, weaving slow patterns in the grass. They could smell Luna's blood still clinging to Rex's coat, smell the newborn's milk-sweet scent drifting faintly through the hollow. Scarjaw was patient. He always had been. Rex growled, a deep, rolling sound that vibrated through the earth. The hyenas hesitated, but hunger pushed them forward. The youngest one lunged first. Rex met it halfway, slamming his paw into its shoulder so hard the air left its lungs in a single choking burst. The animal rolled across the ground, whining. The other hyena darted in from the side. Rex turned with a snarl, jaws snapping shut inches from its throat. Scarjaw watched, measuring, calculating whether his clan had the strength to take down a tired lion, defending something small and helpless. A sharp wail rose from the hollow. The cub. Scarjaw's ears twitched. He'd heard it too. A living newborn was a rare prize. Rex roared, a sound of such raw fury it split the night and startled birds from the acacia trees. He charged, not waiting for the hyenas to decide. Scarjaw dodged back, but Rex's momentum threw all three predators into a tangle of teeth and claws. Dust and fur exploded into the air. The young hyena yelped as Rex's claws raked across its flank. Scarjaw snapped at Rex's hind leg, and Rex kicked backward, sending the old hyena stumbling into a thorn bush. When Rex roared again, it wasn't just warning. It was promise. No hyena would touch the cub, not while he still drew breath. The clan broke. Scarjaw limped into the tall grass, snarling his frustration. The other two younger ones followed, whining. Their shadows dissolved into the dark, swallowed by wind and night. Rex didn't chase. He turned immediately back to the hollow. The cub lay where he had left it, tiny body trembling from hunger. Rex lowered himself beside the newborn, drawing it close again. Its crying softened, but hunger still hollowed every tiny sound it made. Rex lifted his head to the sky. He didn't know how to hunt and protect a newborn at the same time. He didn't know how long he could keep hyenas away. He didn't know if nature had already written this story with a cruel ending. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He would not abandon the cub. Not now. Not ever. Even if it meant breaking every law the wild had taught him. By sunrise, the storm-washed basin glowed with a thin, pale light, but Rex felt none of its warmth. The cub, still nameless in his mind, cried weakly against his chest, its tiny body trembling from hunger. Its cryings were softer now, drained of strength, and that frightened Rex more than any storm or hyena ever had. A newborn's hunger was relentless. If not answered, it became silence. And silence in the wild was death. Rex paced the edge of the grass, torn between two impossible choices. If he stayed, the cub would starve. If he left to hunt, even for a few minutes, Scarjaw's clan could follow the scent straight to the hollow where the cub lay. The hyena leader had tasted Rex's strength the night before, but hunger made predators stubborn. Rex knew Scarjaw would return.
The wind shifted, carrying familiar scents across the plain. Mud, trampled grass, and something else. Milk. Rich, warm, unmistakable. A small zebra herd had gathered near a shallow water hole. The mares standing close together, their flanks brushing as they drank. One of them, a heavy-bodied mare with tired eyes, smelled faintly of grief. Her foal was missing, likely claimed by a predator days earlier. Her udder was full, swollen with milk she no longer had anyone to give to. Rex looked back toward the hollow where the cub waited. His heart hammered in his chest. What he was considering now wasn't simply unusual, it was unheard of. Male lions didn't seek milk. Prey animals didn't share it. And predators didn't walk toward zebras without intent to kill. But survival sometimes required breaking the very rules that shaped the world. Rex picked up the cub gently and began walking, slow and deliberate, toward the waterhole. Each step felt like he was moving against instinct carved over generations. The zebras raised their heads, ears flicking, muscles tightening beneath striped coats. They expected a charge. They expected claws, teeth, blood. Instead, Rex stopped 15 yards away and lowered the cub onto the soft dirt. The cub cried, thin, trembling, desperate. The herd snorted anxiously, stamping the earth. The grieving mare took one step back, then another. But the sound reached her again, tiny, helpless, familiar in a way that twisted something deep inside her. She swung her head toward the cub, her nostrils flaring. Milk dripped softly onto the ground from her swollen udder. Rex did not move. He lowered his great head, making himself as small as a creature like him could be. He did not growl. He did not creep forward. He simply waited, his body still, but his heart pounding so loudly he could feel its beat in his paws. The mare hesitated for a long moment. Then, trembling with uncertainty, she stepped forward. Another step, and then another. She reached the cub, sniffing gently. The cub's cry softened as its nose found warmth. Instinct guided it from there. Small mouth searching, then latching with surprising strength. The mare flinched, but didn't pull away. She stood still, letting the tiny lion drink long enough for its cries to fade into soft, contented breaths. Rex watched in silence, awe settling over him like a second skin. This moment, this impossible union of prey and predator, was something no lion had ever seen. The mare finally stepped back, her duty done, and trotted to rejoin her herd. They fled moments later, spooked by what they couldn't understand. Rex picked up the cub again. Its body felt warmer, steadier, filled with a little more life. But danger still lingered. A rustle behind him broke the moment. Scarjaw stood on a small rise, watching with narrowed eyes. The old hyena's wounded flank was streaked with dried blood, but hunger shone brightly in his stare. He'd seen everything. He now knew Rex's weakness: the cub. Rex bared his teeth in a silent snarl, warning Scarjaw to keep his distance. The hyena only grinned, a twisted expression framed by his crooked jaw, before slinking back into the tall grass, melting into shadow. Rex knew exactly what that meant. The hyenas weren't done, and the cub's life had just become far more dangerous than before.
In the days that followed, Rex searched tirelessly for a place where the cub could rest without fear. The basin was wide, but true safety was rare. A stream could flood, tall grass hid hyenas, and open plains left them exposed to every eye in the sky. Yet on the fourth morning, after a night of restless wandering, Rex found it. A flat rise of sun-warmed stone tucked against the lower cliffs of Makari Basin. The rock slanted gently upward, surrounded by a ring of soft grass and sheltered by overhanging brush. From here, a lion could see almost everything. Rex set the cub down, watching as the tiny creature wobbled awkwardly across the stone. Its steps were unsteady, its legs too short and too thin, but determination carried it forward. It batted at a beetle creeping along the rock, missing badly, but trying again. Rex settled beside him, stretching out to let the early light warm his sore muscles. Exhaustion tugged at him, yet a small flicker of peace touched his chest. For the first time since Luna's death, the world felt almost gentle. The cub, stronger now from the zebra mare's milk, climbed onto Rex's paw and tried to clamber up his foreleg. Rex nudged him gently, amused despite himself. The little one squeaked in protest, then began wrestling with Rex's tail instead. These tiny motions, these simple attempts at play, stirred something deep inside the lion. A warmth that didn't quite have a name, a warmth that wasn't instinct, but choice. Across the basin, unseen by Rex, Ethan crouched behind a cluster of brush. He had returned to the basin to continue documenting wildlife after the storm, but what he found left him frozen behind his lens. A lone male caring for a newborn, protecting it, grooming it, sheltering it, was a rarity bordering on miracle. Ethan steadied his camera, whispering to himself, "No one is going to believe this." His hands trembled as he filmed, knowing he was witnessing something few people on Earth ever would. Rex sensed movement in the distance and stood alert, muscles tensing. But after a long moment, he relaxed. The figures were only a pair of distant gazelles. The cub scrambled between Rex's paws, startled by the sudden shift. Rex lowered his head, brushing the cub's back with a reassuring nudge, and the little lion pressed close again. Life here, atop this sunlit stone, felt safe, predictable, almost like the start of a new pride, small, fragile, but real. The morning stretched on quietly, each minute adding a fragile thread of calm to the tapestry of their new life. Rex lay down again, letting the cub explore the edge of the grass. A butterfly drifted past, and the cub chased it in clumsy loops, each jump ending in a tumble that made Rex huff with warm amusement. For a few precious breaths, the world felt simple. But peace, in the wild, never lasts. A shadow glided silently across the stone. The cub froze mid-step, glancing upward. Rex followed its gaze, eyes narrowing. Far above, circling just once before drifting toward the clouds, was a large bird,
A martial eagle, majestic, silent, calculating. It passed high overhead, its wings cutting across the sun in a slow, deliberate arc. Rex felt a prickle of unease, but the bird made no move to strike. After a few long seconds, its shadow slid across the basin, leaving the stone bright again. Rex lowered his head, but the piece from moments earlier no longer felt as solid. Something had entered the edges of their small world, something patient, something watching. The cub pressed against Rex's leg, sensing the shift in the air even if it didn't understand why. Rex curled his tail around the little one and kept his gaze fixed on the sky long after the eagle had disappeared. The basin had given them a place to breathe, but hidden threats had already begun to draw their circles. High along the rugged walls of the Makari cliffs, where wind carved shallow bowls into ancient stone, a martial eagle stood poised at the edge of her nest. Sky's feathers rippled like layered bronze as she scanned the basin below with sharp, unblinking eyes. Her chick waited behind her, hungry, restless, its thin cries growing more insistent with every passing hour. Food had been scarce since the storm. Small game hid deep in burrows, and hares were quick to spot danger in the open plains. Sky needed a meal large enough to satisfy her growing young. She spread her wings slightly, adjusting her balance, and tilted her head to listen. The cliffs carried sound differently than the ground. Echoes traveled upward in soft, broken threads. This morning, a particular rhythm caught her attention, a pattern she had observed for several days now. She hopped closer to the ledge, peering downward. There, on the sun-struck stone, the lone lion and his cub. The cub's movements were predictable, always curious, always wandering just far enough from the lion's reach before tumbling back towards safety. To Sky, these patterns mattered. She watched the lion settle into a patch of shade, watched the cub bat at a grasshopper, watched the soft way Rex used his muzzle to guide the little one back when danger drifted too close. The routine repeated day after day, reliable as sunrise. Predictability meant opportunity. She flexed her talons, testing their grip against the stone. The cub had grown, but it was still small, still light enough to lift. A single drop from the cliff and she could feed her chick for 2 days. The lion, for all his strength, could not follow her into the sky. She had no reason to rush. She only needed to wait for the moment the cub exposed its back to the open air. A gust of wind lifted her wings. She rode it for a heartbeat, considering. Below, the cub rolled onto its side, chewing clumsily on Rex's tail. The lion huffed with quiet patience, lifting his paw to shield the little one from the glare. Sky noted the gesture. Lions were not gentle creatures, yet this one moved with care that belonged to another world entirely. Even from a distance, the devotion was unmistakable. But devotion didn't matter in the wild. Hunger did. Sky spread her wings fully. The world narrowed into the single thought of flight. Wind hissed along her feathers, promising speed and power. She leaned forward, poised to take off, then stopped. The lion had risen suddenly, muscles tense, gaze fixed on the ridge opposite the stone. He seemed to sense something, though Sky was certain she hadn't revealed herself. His ears rotated, listening. Only after several long seconds did he lie down again, though his head remained slightly raised, as if he were keeping silent watch over something he could not see. Sky eased back, shifting her stance. She would not strike today. The lion was alert, and a failed attempt could cost her more than a meal. She might injure her wing, and her chick would starve. No, she needed precision. She needed the exact moment when the lion relaxed, when the cub wandered just a bit too far into sunlight. That moment would come. It always did. As she turned away, her feathers brushing softly against the dry twigs of her nest, her chick chirped impatiently. She answered with a low, steady call, assurance that food was coming soon, very soon. And far below, on the warm stone where father and cub played in peace, fate circled quietly through the sky, choosing its hour. The next morning arrived with a gentle warmth that felt almost like a blessing. Sunlight spilled across the Makari Basin in long golden bands, brushing the tops of the grass and warming the stone outcrop where Rex and the cub, now stronger, more curious, began their daily ritual. For the first time in days, the air carried no hint of storm or predators. Even the wind seemed hushed, as if the basin itself wished to give the pair a moment of quiet. Rex settled onto the flat stone, stretching his tired muscles. The cub scrambled up his foreleg, determined to reach his shoulder, but tumbling back onto Rex's paw with a tiny grunt of frustration. Rex huffed, a soft, rumbling breath, and nudged him upright again. The cub shook himself proudly, then pounced on a butterfly that dared to drift too close. The morning felt almost tender. A few yards away, Ethan crouched behind a patch of thorn bushes, camera balanced carefully on his knees. He'd been filming wildlife for nearly 15 years, yet nothing he had captured, not migrations, not hunts, not even the rarest animal behavior, felt as compelling as this: a male lion raising a newborn. It went against everything nature taught. Ethan couldn't help whispering into the microphone, "If I didn't see it myself, I'd swear it was impossible." He watched Rex lower his head, touching noses with the cub. On another day, Ethan might have stepped forward for a clearer shot, but something about the moment felt sacred, fragile enough to break if he breathed too loudly. So he stayed hidden, documenting the softest chapter of a story he knew was building towards something far greater. The cub, now bold from sunlight and warmth, hopped onto Rex's tail and bit down with playful ferocity. Rex flicked his tail lightly, careful not to send the little one flying. For a few peaceful minutes, the world was nothing more than soft stone, warm light, and the quiet bond between father and child. Then a faint tremor crossed the air. The cub felt it first. His head lifted, his tiny ears swiveled, his eyes widened with the question he didn't yet know how to ask. Rex noticed the shift and rose halfway, scanning the grasslands. Nothing moved, no scent stirred, no rustle broke the silence. But the shadow did. It slid across the stone in an unnatural sweep, too large for a stork, too silent for a vulture. The cub paused mid-play, pupils narrowing as the darkness glided over him like an omen. Rex's muscles tightened instantly. Ethan's camera dropped an inch as he froze. The shadow circled back once, slow and deliberate, stretching long across the sunlit ground. And then Rex saw her. Sky. The eagle soared high above them, wings outstretched, gliding along an invisible current. She didn't dive, she didn't rush. She simply circled, watching, measuring, studying the distance between cub and father, calculating. Rex growled low, a warning directed at the sky itself. The cub pressed close to his leg, trembling, though he didn't yet understand why.
Sky rose higher, disappearing for a moment into the glare of the sun. But Rex knew what that meant. Eagles didn't circle for pleasure. They circled when choosing their moment, their angle, their prey. Ethan lifted his camera again, breath caught in his throat. He sensed something building, a tension so sharp it felt like a held note in a symphony. "Don't do it," he whispered, though the eagle couldn't hear him. "Not now, not to them!" The wind quieted. The cub took one small, innocent step toward the open edge of the stone. Rex's heart lurched. The morning that had started as the gentlest since Luna's death shifted in an instant, peace bending beneath the weight of something unseen but inevitable. Because high above Makari Basin, Sky had chosen her moment, and she was coming soon. The cub never saw the strike coming. One heartbeat, he was pawing at a drifting leaf. The next, a violent rush of wind split the morning air. A dark shape, broad-winged, silent, deadly, plunged from the sun like a fallen star. Sky hit the stone with impossible speed. Her talons snapped shut around the cub's small body before Rex could fully rise to his feet. A sharp, panicked squeal cut through the air as the cub was lifted off the ground, legs flailing helplessly. Rex roared, a sound so deep it shook loose dust from the cliffs above. He lunged, claws scraping stone, jaws snapping inches beneath Sky's rising wings. But she was already climbing, beating the air with massive strokes that sent loose grass spiraling. The cub's cries trailed behind her in thin, breaking wails that stabbed into Rex's chest harder than any wound he had ever known. Ethan stumbled out from behind the bushes, filming through tears he'd never admit he shed. "Don't do it! No, 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 no!" he shouted, though the wind ripped his voice away the second it left his mouth. He sprinted after Rex, knowing he couldn't help but unable to stand still. He had filmed hunts, kills, losses, but never a father's desperation like this. "Come on, Rex, run!" he urged under his breath. Rex didn't need encouragement. He was already running harder than his body believed possible, paws hammering against the basin floor. His stride devoured the earth in great, desperate leaps, tail streaming behind him, muscles firing with a fury born not from instinct, but from love. He had faced buffalo, storms, hyenas, but nothing prepared him for the sight of his child being carried into the open sky. Nothing in nature gave him the tools to fight an enemy with wings. Sky climbed higher, angling toward her rugged cliff face, where her nest hid in a recessed pocket of stone nearly 70 yards above the basin floor. Her chick called to her, its voice thin but urgent. The promise of feeding her young accelerated her wings. Rex's paws slammed against the base of the cliff an instant later. He looked up. The eagle and his cub disappeared over the lip of the stone ledge. For a moment, just a moment, Rex stood completely still. His chest heaved, his heart hammered, his entire world spun into a single, unbearable point of realization. To save his child, he would have to climb. A lion, built for the ground, not the sky, would have to ascend a cliff that even goats approached with caution. Ethan stumbled out from behind the bushes, filming through tears he'd never admit he shed. "You can't! Rex, there's no way!" But Rex didn't hear him. He only heard the fading cry of the cub. He pressed one paw against the stone wall. It slid. He pressed again, claws scraping for purchase. Above him, the hyena clan began to gather in a loose circle, watching, waiting, their laughter bubbling through the rising heat. The cub cried once more, faint, desperate, fading. Rex roared up at the cliffs, a sound of agony and defiance that rang through the basin like thunder. Then he set his paws against the rock and began to climb. Rex stood at the base of the cliff, staring upward as the last echo of his cub's cry faded into the stone. The wall rose in front of him like the side of a mountain, sheer, pitiless, a vertical face carved by centuries of wind. No ledges large enough for a lion, no gentle slopes, just raw, unforgiving height. Everything in his body told him to stay on the ground where he belonged. Everything in his instinct insisted he could go no farther. Lions did not climb cliffs. They never had. They weren't built for it. But his cub was somewhere up there. Rex placed a paw on the rock. It slid over the surface. The stone was rough, fractured from the storm, but the cracks were small, too small for a lion's weight. He tried again, hooking his claws deep. A pebble broke loose and bounced down the slope, clattering past his paws before settling in the dust. The sound made the hyenas stir. Scarjaw and his clan had gathered below, drawn by the commotion. They paced in a loose circle, heads low, tails twitching in anticipation. To them,
This wasn't tragedy, it was entertainment. A lion forced against the wall, a cub trapped above, an eagle guarding its nest. They couldn't reach the cub yet, but they knew something would eventually fall. Something always fell. Scarjaw tilted his head, mocking Rex with a wide grin born from that crooked jaw. His laughter, a harsh, hollow cackle, rose into the air and echoed cruelly across the basin. Rex didn't respond. He couldn't waste breath on anger. Every muscle in his body trembled with exhaustion, but a deeper force pushed him forward, one that had guided him since the night Luna died. He pressed his forehead against the stone for a moment, drawing strength from the cold surface before lifting his paw again. He found a crack, then another, then a shallow ridge barely wide enough for 2 claws. He pulled. His body lurched upward, hind legs scrambling, claws scraping for purchase. Dust showered down around him. For a moment he hung awkwardly, nearly slipping before he shifted his weight and found a second foothold. His paws throbbed instantly, the pressure shooting through his legs like fire. Still, he climbed. Ethan, breathless and shaking, reached the cliff just behind him. "Rex, you can't do this," he whispered, horrified. "You're not built for it. You'll fall." But the words had no place in the lion's world. Rex didn't look back. Above them, the wind rippled across the cliff face. Pebbles loosened and fell past his ears, some brushing the edge of his mane before scattering across the basin floor. The higher he climbed, the more the world below blurred into patches of movement, grass, dust, and the restless shifting of the hyenas. His claws slipped once, scraping violently across the rock. His body swung to the side, dangerously close to losing every hold he'd gained. A gasp escaped Ethan, and Scarjaw's clan howled with excitement. But Rex slammed his weight into the stone again, clawing with desperate precision until he caught another crack. His breath came in ragged bursts, but he kept climbing, inch by inch. Then came the scent. Faint, almost imaginary, but real enough to snap his heart into a faster rhythm. The cub. It drifted down from above, carried by a thin current of wind sweeping along the rock face. Not fear, not pain, just the soft, milky smell of newborn life. He closed his eyes for half a second. That scent anchored him, steadied him, reminded him why he defied instinct and reason, why he climbed. He opened his eyes again and pulled himself higher. The cliff tore at his paws, splitting the skin beneath his claws. Blood smeared across the stone, darkening the cracks he relied on. Each movement became a battle against his own failing strength, but he did not stop. Below, Scarjaw shifted uneasily. His grin faded. Even he, cruel, opportunistic, hardened by a lifetime of scavenging, felt a strange, unwelcome chill at what he was witnessing. Lions didn't climb. Lions couldn't climb. But this lion was climbing. Above, the wind carried one more faint sound. A whimper, barely louder than a breath. The cub was alive. Rex dug his claws in deeper, ignoring the pain. Nature said stop. Rex refused. And with that refusal, he carried himself one step closer to the sky and to the impossible. The higher Rex climbed, the more the world below dissolved into a hazy blur. The wind pushed at him from the side, tugging his mane, rattling loose stones that clattered down the cliff like tiny echoes of danger. Every muscle in his body trembled under the strain. His paws, already torn from the first stretch of stone, left thin streaks of blood on the rock. But he kept moving, driven by a force deeper than instinct, something raw, old, and immovable. Midway up the cliff, a sudden crack split beneath his paw. The rock crumbled, sending Rex's weight lurching backward. His body swung away from the wall, suspended for one terrifying heartbeat. The wind roared in his ears, his hind legs scrabbled desperately, claws scraping uselessly against smooth stone. Far below, Ethan gasped his name, the sound, small and terrified. Rex slammed his shoulder into the cliff, claws flailing until one caught a narrow seam. The jerk of his body nearly tore his leg out of its socket, but it saved him. He pressed himself flat against the stone, chest heaving, breath shaking. For a moment he trembled, not from fear, but from the brutal truth that gravity wanted him back. The cliff seemed steeper now, angling in just enough to make each movement harder. He shifted his weight, pain burning through his paws, and tried again. One hold, then another. His claws cracked, warm blood spread under their tips, but still he climbed. Below, the hyenas had grown silent. Even Scarjaw stood motionless, his crooked jaw hanging open. This wasn't entertainment anymore. It was something they didn't understand, something that made their laughter catch in their throats. Ethan, hands trembling, pressed closer to the cliff. He wanted to call out, to guide Rex, but the lion wasn't listening for human voices. He was listening only for one sound, the faint cry of his cub. And finally, it reached him again, a thin, fragile whimper carried by the wind from somewhere above a narrow outcrop. Rex lifted his head, his eyes sharpened, his body leaned into the climb. But as he pushed upward, a new threat emerged. A pair of vultures, irritated by Rex's presence so close to their territory, swooped low over the cliff. Their wings sliced through the air with sharp, angry beats. One dove directly towards Rex's head, talons extended. He jerked to the side, nearly losing his grip as the bird grazed his mane. Another came from above, striking the cliff near his paw with a brutal flap of wings that sent dust into his eyes. Rex roared, short, guttural, more frustration than threat. The sound echoed across the basin, bouncing off stone and sky. The vultures hesitated, startled by the power in it. They circled once more, then drifted away, unwilling to test a lion that clearly intended to defy the world itself. With renewed determination, Rex climbed faster. His shoulder brushed against a jagged edge, slicing open a fresh line of blood that trickled down his leg. The scent filled the air, iron, heat, sacrifice. But pain had become background noise. He was beyond the point where it mattered. At last, he reached a narrow ledge not much wider than his paw. He dragged himself onto it, panting hard, sides shuddering, his muscles quivered, burning from the unrelenting climb. But when he lifted his head, he saw it. Just a few meters above, a shadow moved along the rocks, a nest of woven sticks clinging to the cliffside, and inside it, something small struggling to move. His cub, alive. Rex let out a sound, unlike any roar or growl. It was low, soft, almost a broken hum, a father calling to his child. The cub whimpered in return, a tiny sound that struck deeper than any wound the cliff could give him. There were only a few more meters left, the hardest ones, the most dangerous ones. But now, for the first time since the eagle vanished into the clouds, Rex felt his strength gather again. Not from muscle, not from instinct, but from love. And he climbed.
Rex hauled himself upward, his claws digging into cracks barely wider than a whisper. The rock face pressed against his chest, scraping his ribs with each breath. Above him, the eagle's nest clung to the cliff like some ancient fortress, woven sticks, branches, and bones, hammered together by years of storms. The air changed as he climbed closer, filled with the sharp scent of feathers and old prey. And beneath it all, he caught the faint, trembling smell of his cub. That was all he needed. The final stretch was almost vertical. The stone glistened from morning heat, hot enough to sting his paws. Rex tested a foothold, too shallow. He shifted sideways, searching. A small ridge caught his claws. It would hold him, but barely. He exhaled, drew strength from the memory of his cub pressed against him on cold nights, and pushed upward. Halfway through the last climb, a sudden shadow swept across the cliff. The eagle returned. Her wings cut the air with a hollow thrum, her talons gleaming like polished knives. She screeched sharply, a piercing cry that stabbed the silence. She saw him now, not as a threat below, but as an intruder nearly at her nest, her territory, her young, her kill. She folded her wings and dove. Rex had no room to dodge. The narrow ledge boxed him against the rock. He flattened himself instinctively, claws locking deeper into the stone just as the eagle's talons sliced across his left shoulder. A white-hot line of pain tore down his side. Rex roared, but the sound was swallowed by the wind. He pressed himself tighter into the stone, every muscle screaming. Another dive came, faster this time, fueled by fury. She aimed for his head. Rex lifted a paw, swiped blindly, and felt feathers brush his pads as she veered off at the last second. A few loose feathers drifted past his face, carried away by the wind like drifting ash. He didn't have long. The eagle circled back, calculating, choosing her next angle. Rex forced his body upward, ignoring the tremor in his legs. His paws bled freely now, leaving red streaks along the cliff that the wind smeared into the stone. One more pull. Another. A final, desperate stretch. And then, his paw hooked over the rim of the ledge. He heaved himself up, collapsing for a breath on the narrow shelf beside the nest. The structure loomed over him, huge, messy, alive with movement. Sticks creaked under the shifting weight of the eagle's adolescent chick. The young bird hissed when it saw him, backing deeper into the nest. But Rex looked past it. There, tangled among the branches, lay his cub, shivering, terrified, alive. The cub lifted its head, eyes wide, and let out a fragile whimper. That single cry crushed whatever fear remained in Rex's chest. He stepped toward the nest, muscles trembling but steady. Every instinct he ever known screamed in confusion. Lions did not stand on cliff ledges, did not approach eagle nests, did not fight gravity. Yet here he stood.
Behind him, the rush of wings signaled another attack. The eagle dove again, all hesitation gone. Rex curled around his cub, lowering his body protectively as her talons raked across his back. The pain was blinding. He bit down hard to stay silent. His cub pressed into his chest, trembling violently. The eagle soared upward for another strike. Rex didn't wait. He gripped his cub gently in his jaws and turned toward the ledge's edge. The nest crackled behind him as the eagle shrieked, her massive wings beating against the wind. The world around him narrowed into one truth. He had reached his son, but reaching him wasn't enough. He had to get him out, and the only way out was down. Rex stood on the narrow ledge, his cub held gently in his jaws, the wind clawing at his mane as though trying to peel him from the cliff. The eagle circled above, wings spread wide, readying herself for another strike. Her cry sliced through the air, sharp, furious, unrelenting. She wasn't just defending her territory now. She wanted back what she believed she had earned. Rex pressed his body low, shielding the tiny cub beneath him. The ledge shuddered under his weight, flakes of stone breaking loose and tumbling into the emptiness below. The height spun in his vision. One wrong step, one slip, and the two of them would crash into the basin floor where only dust and hyenas waited. But turning back was impossible. Climbing down was impossible. Fighting the eagle on this ledge while holding a newborn was unthinkable. The eagle dove again. Rex twisted, absorbing the blow across his ribs. Her talons tore deep, ripping through fur and flesh. His paw slipped on the ledge. For a heartbeat, he felt his weight drop, his body lurching outward into open air. The world tilted. His cub squeaked softly in his grip, a sound fragile enough to shatter the strongest heart. Rex slammed his weight sideways, catching the ledge again. Blood smeared the stone beneath his paws. Pain raged through him, hot, sharp, vivid, but it could not touch the place in him where resolve lived. He set the cub between his paws and looked down.
And below, cutting across the rugged earth like a piece of sky fallen to the ground, was water. A spring-fed pool, deep, dark, still. A miracle carved by nature exactly where he needed it. It wasn't directly below him. He'd have to leap out, farther than any lion was meant to jump. The drop was high enough to kill him if he misjudged even slightly. The air shimmered from heat, the wind howled upward, the water glistened like a question only the desperate dared answer. Behind him, the eagle shrieked and dove again, angling for the cub. Rex understood what had to happen. There was no time to think, no time to measure distance or test footing. The world had narrowed to a single decision, one he had been moving toward ever since Luna's last breath. He scooped his cub into his jaws, he braced his hind legs, he inhaled once, deeply, filling his lungs with the thin cliffside air. The eagle was near him now, talons outstretched, wings beating the wind into a frenzy. Rex leapt. The stone vanished beneath him, the sky opened around him, and gravity seized them both. For a moment, the world grew silent, so silent he could hear the cub's tiny heartbeat against his teeth. The wind tore through his mane, flattening it behind him, as the cliff raced upward and the basin floor rose in a rushing blur of color. The eagle screamed above him, furious, cheated. She circled helplessly, unable to follow where he fell. Rex angled his body, shielding the cub beneath his chest, curling inward to take the brunt of whatever waited below. The pool grew larger, impossibly fast, an expanding circle of hope and danger fused into one. He had one chance, one landing, one miracle. The surface of the water flashed like hammered steel, and then it rose up to meet them.
The impact was not a splash, but an explosion. Water erupted around Rex in a towering column, swallowing him and the cub in a single brutal surge. The force slammed into his chest like a charging buffalo. His jaws nearly opened from the shock, but instinct, love, and something older than either clamped them shut. He curled tighter around the cub as the world plunged into cold, crushing darkness. Down they went. Deeper, deeper still. The pool was far colder beneath the surface than it had looked from above. The weight of the fall drove Rex toward the bottom, green shadows swirling around him like the folds of a vast underwater curtain. His mane dragged him down, waterlogging him, pulling at his body with heavy strands. The cub squirmed weakly in his grip, letting out a tiny muffled sound lost in the water. Rex's lungs burned. His ribs ached where the eagle's talons had cut deep. His muscles screamed for air, for rest, for release, but none of that mattered, not while his son's life rested between his teeth. At last the momentum slowed. For a heartbeat, they hung suspended in the dim stillness, limbs drifting weightlessly. A shaft of light filtered down from above, slicing through the green like a blade of sun reaching for them. Rex kicked. Nothing. His hind legs barely responded, numb from pain and exhaustion. His paws felt heavy, clumsy. He tried again, harder this time, forcing strength from the last reserves of his battered body. He rose an inch, then two. His chest tightened, his lungs screamed. A deep instinct roared inside him, move, breathe, save him. Rex kicked again and again, each stroke dragging him upward through the dark water. His vision blurred at the edges, light flickered above him, wavering like a distant star. Bubbles streamed from his nose and mouth, each one precious air he could not afford to lose. Just as the edges of his vision turned black, his head burst through the surface. He gasped, dragging in a ragged breath that scraped his lungs raw.
Water cascaded from his mane. The cub sputtered weakly, but was alive. Alive, nestled safely beneath Rex's chin. Rex paddled clumsily, pulling them toward the muddy bank. The swim felt endless. His legs trembled violently beneath the water, each kick weaker than the last. But the shoreline came closer, inch by inch, until finally his paws touched the bottom. He dragged himself forward, staggering out of the pool like a creature risen from another world. He collapsed onto solid ground, chest heaving, sides shuddering. Water pooled around him in dark shapes. His paws bled freely now, the cracks deepened by the climb and softened by the water. His shoulder burned from the eagle's talons, but he still held the cub, still kept him close, still shielded him with one trembling foreleg.
The cub coughed once, twice, then let out a soft, pitiful whimper. It burrowed into Rex's chest, soaking wet and shaking with shock. Rex lowered his head and groomed him gently, licking the tiny body in slow, steady strokes. His tongue rasped over the cub's fur, warming him, grounding him, telling him wordlessly, "You're safe. You're here. I didn't let go." Across the basin, animals stood frozen. Zebras, gazelles, even the hyenas, silent witnesses to a miracle no creature had ever seen. Scarjaw, once so eager for blood, lowered his head with an expression almost resembling disbelief. The eagle circled once overhead, screeching her frustration into the open sky, then turned and vanished into the cliffs. The basin exhaled. The world resumed. But Rex didn't move. He lay there, soaking, bleeding, shaking from pain, from exhaustion, from the staggering truth that they were both still alive. His cub, trembling beneath him, slowly relaxed. Its tiny breaths steadied, its body pressed closer, anchoring itself to the warmth of the only being in the world who could have saved it. Rex lowered his head to rest beside the cub, his breath stirring its damp fur. He had climbed where lions did not climb. He had leapt where lions did not leap. He had lived where lions should have died. And for the first time since Luna's death, his eyes softened, not in defeat, not in grief, but in quiet, fierce triumph. His son was alive, and nothing in the wild would ever be the same. Rex lay beneath the shade of a low acacia tree, his body pressed into the earth as if the ground itself were the only thing keeping him from collapsing entirely. The pool still shimmered behind him, a quiet witness to the impossible leap that had changed everything. His cub slept curled against his chest, small breaths rising and falling in a steady rhythm. But Rex's breaths were not steady. Each inhale carried a tremor. Each exhale carried pain. The wound across his shoulders burned. His paws, split, torn, and raw, throbbed with every heartbeat. The climb had shredded them. The fall had nearly finished the job. His muscles ached in places he never knew could ache. Even the air brushing against his talon wounds felt like fire. He tried shifting his weight, but his legs buckled beneath him. He wasn't dying, but he was close to breaking. The cub stirred, sensing the change in his father's breathing. Its tiny head lifted, nudging weakly at his chin. Rex bent down and touched the cub's side with a gentle rumble, a soft reassurance, even though he himself felt far from strong. The cub relaxed again, curling into the warmth of his scarred chest. But the dry season was moving in. Water holes shrinking, cover thinner, prey quicker and more alert. And Rex couldn't hunt. Not today, not tomorrow, maybe not for many days. His paws could barely hold his weight. He couldn't risk leaving the cub alone even for minutes. Predators would smell weakness from miles away.
The breeze shifted, carrying the scent of hyenas. Scarjaw had returned. From the far slope, the hyena clan lingered, watching with unsettling stillness. They didn't approach, not yet, but their eyes gleamed with patience. They knew the truth. A lion who couldn't hunt was a lion who would soon starve. And a starving lion was easy prey. Rex lifted his head and met Scarjaw's gaze. The hyena's jagged grin widened slightly, but he backed away into the tall grass. He wasn't ready, not yet, but he would return. The sun climbed higher. Heat shimmered across the grasslands. Rex's tongue hung slightly from his mouth as he fought against dehydration. He needed water, food, something to rebuild strength, but moving hurt, standing hurt, breathing hurt. For the first time, he wondered if saving the cub had cost him more than he had to give. A rustling of wings made him tense, but this time it wasn't the eagle. 3 storks landed near the water, folding their long legs with slow, cautious steps. Their presence calmed the nearby animals. Nothing dangerous followed storks. A small family of warthogs approached the opposite bank. A lone gazelle bent to drink. Life eased back into its rhythm. Rex stayed still, watching everything, guarding everything. Hours passed like this, slow, heavy, painful. Each minute carved into him like a blade, but he endured because his cub's tiny breaths depended on it. Near sunset, hope arrived in an unexpected form. A wildebeest carcass, half-eaten by vultures, lay on the slope beyond the acacia grove. The wind carried its scent to Rex's nose, old, rough, but edible. His stomach tightened painfully. He hadn't eaten in days. He looked down at his cub, still asleep, tiny paws curled against his mane. Leaving him would be dangerous. Staying meant starvation. Rex lowered his head and nudged the cub awake. The tiny creature blinked up at him, trusting, unaware of the danger surrounding them. Rex gently lifted him by the scruff and carried him toward a hollow beneath the acacia, dense enough to hide scent, shady enough to cool the air. He lowered the cub inside, licking its head once before pulling away. The cub whimpered softly, but Rex nudged him back into the shadows, urging him to stay hidden. Then, with every injury throbbing, he turned toward the carcass. His steps were shaky. His paws left faint drops of blood in the soil, but he kept moving, slowly, quietly, knowing Scarjaw watched from somewhere unseen. Every inch was agony. Every breath felt stolen, but his son needed him strong. And for that, Rex would walk through pain again and again, no matter what waited in the grass.
Rex reached the carcass just as the sun dipped below the ridge, painting the savanna in fading gold. The air cooled, but his body burned with exhaustion. He lowered his head and tore into the meat, slowly, painfully. Every chew sent sharp jolts through his jaw. His paws trembled beneath him, but he forced himself to eat. He had to. His cub's survival depended on his strength. The meat was old, tough, but rich enough to steady his weakening limbs. He swallowed mouthful after mouthful until his breath steadied and the trembling in his legs eased just enough for him to stand without collapsing. For a moment, he let himself believe this small victory would carry them through the night. Then he heard it. A laugh, low, rising, grating. Scarjaw. Rex froze. The grass on his left rippled, then on his right. Shadows slithered between the stalks. 5, 7, maybe more. Hyenas moved like smoke, circling, their eyes glinting in the half-light. They'd waited all afternoon, letting Rex climb, fall, bleed, and weaken. Now they wanted the carcass, and him. Scarjaw stepped forward first.
his twisted jaw giving him that cruel, lopsided grin. He paced slowly toward Rex, savoring the moment. Not a charge, not an attack. No, Scarjaw wanted to watch the lion break. Rex lifted his head, blood staining his mane, his breath heavy. He didn't roar. He didn't even growl. He simply stared, steadfast, unbroken, refusing to show fear. But inside, he felt the truth. Fighting them now would be suicide, and leaving the carcass meant losing the only food he could still reach. Scarjaw took another step. Another hyena circled behind. Two more crept toward the carcass, jaws dripping with hunger. Rex lunged, not at Scarjaw, but at the pair going for the meat. A burst of fury gave him strength. He roared, shoving them back. The sound tore through the savanna, echoing off the stones. Birds scattered from the treetops. The hyenas flinched, but only for a second. Then they laughed. High, cruel, rising like a chorus. Scarjaw moved in, snapping at Rex's hind leg. His teeth grazed the lion's skin before Rex spun and slammed a paw across Scarjaw's face. The hyena stumbled, yelping, but recovered fast. Blood flecked the ground. Rex was fighting, not to win, but to survive, seconds at a time. He struck again, dodged again, but the ring closed tighter. He couldn't let them reach the cub. He couldn't die here, not when his son lay alone in the acacia hollow. A hyena lunged at his flank. He twisted just in time, but pain ripped through his shoulder, the same spot the eagle had torn open. He staggered, collapsing to one knee. The clan surged forward. Scarjaw saw it, the weakness, the moment he had waited for. He charged. Rex braced himself to meet the attack when a deep rumble rolled across the grasslands. Not thunder, not Rex, another lion. Out of the darkness strode Ethan, still young, his mane not yet fully grown, but strong and furious. He charged into the hyena circle with a roar that shook the air. His paws slammed into the ground like bursts of thunder. His teeth flashed white in the dying light. Hyenas scattered in panic as Ethan barreled into them, sending two tumbling head over paws. Scarjaw whirled, snarling, but Ethan met him head-on, knocking the crooked-jawed hyena onto his side with a bone-jarring blow. Rex forced himself upright. The sight of Ethan beside him, shoulder to shoulder, sparked something fierce inside him. For the first time since Luna's death, he wasn't alone. Together they roared. The sound rolled across the basin, a challenge, a warning, a promise. Scarjaw hesitated, backing away. The other hyenas froze, confused, waiting for a signal. Rage lit Scarjaw's eyes, but he wasn't suicidal. Not tonight. Not against two lions willing to die for their own. He retreated, snarling, limping, throwing one last hateful glare before melting into the tall grass. The rest followed, their laughter fading into the darkness like a dying storm. The night grew quiet again. Rex swayed on his feet, exhaustion overwhelming him. Ethan pressed his shoulder gently against his father's, steadying him without a word. For a moment they stood together, battered, bloodied, but victorious. Rex looked toward the acacia hollow, where his cub slept unaware of the battle that had nearly ended everything. "We're not done," Ethan murmured under his breath, eyes scanning the darkness. "But we're still here." Rex touched his son's scent on the wind and breathed deeply. They had survived the fall. They had survived the hyenas. And the night, for now, belonged to them. Dawn crept over the basin with a soft amber glow, brushing the grasslands with gentle warmth after the violent night. Rex stirred beneath the acacia tree, every inch of him bruised or bleeding. His mane, still damp, clung to his neck in tangled clumps.
His paws ached so intensely that even the cool morning soil felt like fire. But when he lifted his head and saw his cub curled safely against his chest, he felt something stronger than pain. He felt purpose. The cub blinked sleepily, letting out a tiny rumble, half yawn, half attempt at a roar. Rex lowered his head, touching his nose to his son's. The little one climbed unsteadily onto his father's foreleg, testing his strength, his balance. His paws pressed lightly against Rex's scarred skin, and the big lion breathed in every second of the moment. Ethan approached with slow, respectful steps. His coat was streaked with dust from the night battle, and his shoulder carried a fresh bite mark, but his eyes were bright. He moved with the cautious confidence of a young male who had stepped into something larger than himself. "He's stronger today," Ethan murmured, nodding at the cub. "He's recovering faster than both of us." Rex let out a low hum of agreement. The cub stood and wobbled, lifting his head proudly toward the morning sky, unaware of how close the world had come to losing him. He let out another tiny sound, louder this time, more focused. Ethan smiled. "Trying to roar already, huh? Brave little thing." The cub tried again, this time a squeak, sharp and determined. Rex nudged him gently, the closest thing to encouragement he could give. The little one planted his paws, braced his tiny legs, and pushed out a sound that wasn't a roar, but wasn't far from becoming one someday. The sound echoed softly across the grass, carried by the breeze like a promise. Rex felt something inside him shift, a swell of pride, fierce and full. This cub had endured storms, talons, cliffs, and darkness. Now he stood, unbroken, ready for the world. And Rex knew what he was seeing wasn't simply recovery, it was beginning. But danger still lingered in the basin. Scarjaw's clan wouldn't forget last night's defeat. The eagle still nested high above, watching from the cliffs. And word had already spread among the scavengers. A weakened lion and his cub made tempting targets. Rex's wounds needed time to heal, and time was the one luxury the wild never gave freely. Ethan, noticing Rex's unsteady posture, stepped closer. "I'll hunt today," he said quietly. "You stay with him." It was more than an offer. It was loyalty, a commitment, a son standing beside his father, not by blood, but by bond. Rex met the young lion's eyes and gave a slow, deliberate nod, an honor few ever earned. Ethan padded off toward the ridge, muscles rolling beneath his hide, confidence growing with every step. Rex watched him disappear into the grasses, then turned back to the cub. The little one stumbled forward, exploring the world beyond the acacia's shade. His tiny face lifted toward a drifting butterfly, and he pounced, missing completely, but landing with a soft thud that made Rex's ears tilt in quiet amusement. Yet even in this tenderness, Rex remained alert. His ears scanned the wind. His eyes tracked every shadow. His body, though battered, stayed coiled with protective watchfulness. The cub needed food, safety, and time to grow, and Rex would give all three, even if it meant bleeding for each one. The little one tumbled back toward him, sitting between Rex's paws as though the entire world made sense only there. Rex lowered his head, brushing the cub's back with his chin. The morning sun warmed them both, lighting the scars that traced Rex's body like a map of battles survived and sacrifices made. The cub inhaled deeply, leaning into his father's warmth. Then, from deep within his tiny chest, he tried one more time. A squeak, a croak, a broken, wobbly attempt, but louder than before.
Rex closed his eyes. The first roar never came strong. It came honest, the kind that promised a future. Today, the cub learned he had a voice. Tomorrow, he would learn he had a kingdom.
Years slipped quietly across the basin, softening the scars on the land, but never the memories they held. Seasons turned the grasses green, then gold, then brittle with drought, only to bloom again with the rains. Life renewed itself in endless circles, but some stories stayed, etched into the earth, whispered between the animals, carried by wind the way truth always is. And among those stories, one towered above the rest. Rex lived long enough to see his cub grow from a trembling newborn into a powerful young lion with a mane darkening like storm clouds. The cub, whom the basin soon called Saul, walked beside his father with quiet confidence, always glancing back to ensure Rex followed. Their bond, forged through talons, cliffs, and blood, made them move almost as one. Ethan remained nearby too, never claiming a kingdom of his own. Some said he chose loyalty over territory. Others said he stayed because he knew Saul would one day need more than a father. He would need a pride, a family, a future. But time treats every lion the same, even the ones who leap from cliffs. Rex's steps grew slower, his breaths grew deeper, his nights grew longer. Not from pain, though pain lived in every scar, but from age. His body had carried more than any lion's was meant to bear, and still he watched over Saul with eyes that held both pride and peace. One evening, as the sun dipped low and set the sky on fire, Saul nudged his father awake with gentle insistence. For reasons he couldn't voice, not in words, not yet, Saul led Rex back toward the cliffs. The same cliffs where everything had almost ended, and where everything had truly begun. The climb down the slope was slow. Rex paused often, resting, breathing deep. Saul stayed close, his large frame brushing against his father's to steady him. Ethan followed at a respectful distance, knowing some moments belonged only to blood, even when blood was carried not in veins, but in love. They reached the base of the towering wall just as the first stars blinked awake. The pool still shimmered at the bottom, fed by hidden springs. The surface rippled with a soft breeze, glowing faintly with moonlight. Rex approached it, lowering his head as if greeting an old friend. The water held the memory of their survival, of the impossible leap that defied every law nature had written. Saul stepped beside him, gazing up at the cliff face with quiet awe. Though he'd grown strong, taller even than Rex in his youth, he knew he could never climb that wall. No lion could. Not then, not now, not ever again. Only his father had, and only for him. Rex eased himself down onto the cool earth, his body sinking slowly, gratefully. Saul pressed against his side, tucking himself close the way he had as a cub. Rex rumbled weakly, brushing his nose against Saul's mane. His breaths came softer now, spaced wider apart. Ethan approached, bowing his head in quiet respect. He lay a few feet away, guarding them both the way Rex once guarded him. The night wrapped around the three of them, calm, warm, timeless. Rex lifted his head one last time. His eyes found Saul's. Amber meeting amber. Strength meeting legacy. And in that look, Saul understood. Rex wasn't afraid. He wasn't holding on. He wasn't letting go. He was simply finishing a story. The great lion lowered his head to Saul's chest, exhaling a long, deep breath. His body relaxed fully, peacefully, the tension leaving him like wind leaving sails. The basin held its breath. The wind stilled. The grasses quieted. And Rex, the lion who once climbed the impossible and leapt the unforgivable, closed his eyes for the last time. Saul let out a soft sound, not a roar, not a cry, but something small and trembling, filled with a grief only children understand. He pressed his head into his father's mane, breathing in the scent that had meant safety since the day he was torn from the sky. Ethan stepped forward, placing his forehead against Saul's shoulder. They stayed like that until dawn. When the sun finally rose, Saul stood. Not as a cub, not as a shadow, but as the heir to a legacy so unbelievable that even the cliffs whispered it. He lifted his head toward the golden morning. The first roar that came from his chest shook the basin like a living heartbeat, deep, powerful, unbroken. Birds took flight, antelope froze. The wind carried the sound across miles, through every hollow, across every ridge. It was not just the roar of a new king. It was the roar of a promise. That courage lives beyond fear. That love lives beyond nature. That some lions are born from legends. And some legends are born from fathers. And somewhere in the cliffs, where stone remembers everything, the wind answered softly, as if bowing to the lion who once climbed toward the sky for the only thing that mattered. The story was over, but the legacy had just begun.